Rachel Moore wiped down the counter at Danny's diner for what felt like the 100th time that evening. The clock on the wall showed 7:45 p.m., and her feet were already killing her. 3 years of this. 3 years since she'd walked across that stage with her xenobiology degree, thinking the galaxy was about to open up for her. Instead, she got rejection after rejection. Turns out everyone wanted xenobiologists with experience, but nobody wanted to give you that first job to get the experience. The universe had a sick sense of humor. New Seattle wasn't a bad place to be stuck, though. After humanity joined the Galactic Council 15 years ago, cities like this popped up everywhere. Aliens and humans living side by side, mostly peacefully. Rachel had grown up fascinated by other species, spent her childhood reading about Krell culture and Vraxian traditions while other kids played video games. Fat lot of good that did her now, she thought, tossing the rag into the sink. The door chimed. Rachel looked up and felt her breath catch slightly. A Krell had just walked in, and he was old. Really old. His crystalline carapace, which should have been bright and almost glowing, had dulled to a cloudy gray. He moved like every step hurt, his mantis-like body struggling with the simple act of walking. But what caught Rachel's attention was the medal hanging from his chest. Even tarnished with age, she recognized it immediately. A Star of Valor. She'd written a 20-page paper on those medals in college. Only 12 Krell in their entire history had ever received one. "Evening, sir," Rachel said warmly, grabbing a menu. "Right this way." She led him to a corner booth, the one with extra cushioning that was easier on older joints, regardless of species. The Krell settled in slowly, and up close, Rachel could see the scars along his carapace. Battle scars. This wasn't just any old Krell. This was a warrior who'd seen things. "Can I start you off with some water? We have the mineral blend that's safe for Krell physiology." The old alien's multifaceted eyes fixed on her, and something like surprise flickered there. "You know Krell dietary needs." "Studied xenobiology in college," Rachel said with a slight smile. "Never got to use it professionally, but at least I can make sure you don't get poisoned by Earth food." A sound like clicking crystals came from him. Laughter, Rachel realized. Krell laughter. Then I am in good hands. "Yes, the mineral water, please." Rachel had just returned with his water when the door chimed again. Her heart sank. 4 Vraxian teenagers strutted in like they owned the place. Vraxians were impressive, she'd give them that. 7 feet tall, built like bodybuilders, with skin that shifted between deep purple and crimson depending on their mood. These 4 were young, probably around 16 in human years, and their skin was bright red. Aggressive. Looking for trouble. They spotted the elderly Krell immediately. The tallest one, with ritual scars along his arms, elbowed his friend and jerked his chin toward the corner booth. They grabbed a table right next to the Krell, talking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Man, check out the fossil over there," the tall one said in Vraxian. He didn't realize Rachel understood every word. "Probably fought in the Unity Wars." "What's that, like 100 years ago?" His friends laughed. "More like museum wars," another one chimed in. "Should be in a display case, not taking up space here." Rachel felt her jaw tighten. She glanced at Mr. Peterson, the manager, who was suddenly very interested in something behind the register. The other customers had that look people get when they see something wrong happening but don't want to get involved. Eyes down, minds elsewhere, responsibility deflected. The elderly Krell just sat there, staring at his menu like he couldn't hear them. But Rachel could see the slight tremor in his crystalline hands. When the old Krell tried to get up to use the restroom, the tall Vraxian accidentally pushed his chair back, blocking the aisle. "Oh, sorry, Pops. Didn't see you there. You know, with you being so small and ancient and all." His friends howled with laughter. One of them flicked a piece of bread at the Krell's table. It landed in his water glass with a splash. That was it. Something in Rachel just snapped. Maybe it was 3 years of feeling useless. Maybe it was all those hours studying cultures and languages that nobody cared about. Maybe it was just that she was tired of watching people look away when something wrong happened right in front of them. She walked straight over to their table, putting herself between the Vraxians and the Krell. At 5'4", she barely came up to their chests, but she looked the tall one right in the eye. "You need to leave. Now." She said it in perfect Vraxian, the street dialect they'd been using. The shock on their faces would have been funny under different circumstances. The tall one recovered first, leaning down to loom over her. "You speak Vraxian? That's cute. Why don't you mind your business, little human?" "This is my business. I work here, and you're harassing a customer." Leave, or I call enforcement. Call them, he said, shoving her shoulder. Not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to make his point. Rachel didn't call enforcement. Her brain was running on pure adrenaline now, past the point of thinking things through. She turned, grabbed the industrial cleaning solution from her cart, the stuff they used on the grills, and before anyone could stop her, she sprayed the tall Vraxian right in the face. He screamed. The chemical was completely harmless to humans and Krell, but Vraxian's skin was more sensitive. It wouldn't hurt him, not really, but it burned like crazy. His friends jumped up, chaos erupting as they tried to help him while also yelling threats at Rachel. She didn't stick around to listen. She grabbed the elderly Krell by the arm, gentle but firm. Come on, back door, now. To his credit, he moved fast. They hurried through the kitchen while the Vraxian teenagers tore through the dining room, knocking over chairs and shouting. Rachel pushed open the back door, and the cool evening air hit them. Rain was starting to fall. You'll be okay from here? She asked. The old Krell looked at her with those multifaceted eyes, and she could swear she saw respect there. More than okay, young human. Thank you. He disappeared into the rain, moving faster than Rachel would have thought possible. She turned back to face the music. Mr. Peterson stood in the doorway, his face red with anger. My office. Now. 5 minutes later, she was cleaning out her locker, her uniform shirt in a plastic bag, officially unemployed. Peterson had called it assault and destruction of property. Never mind that those kids had been harassing an elderly customer. Never mind that everyone else had just watched. Rachel walked home in the rain, her jacket soaked through, wondering how she was going to make rent. She had no idea her life was about to change forever. Rachel's apartment was about as depressing as apartments got. Studio, 4th floor walk-up, with a radiator that clanked all night and a view of a brick wall. But it was hers, or at least it would be for another month until her savings ran out. She sat cross-legged on her futon, laptop open, scrolling through job postings while eating instant ramen straight from the cup. The noodles were barely warm, but she was too tired to care. Waitress needed at Mickey's Bar and Grill. Must have experience. Great. Dishwasher position available, night shift. She'd take it if she had to. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Probably a spam call. She ignored it and kept scrolling. The phone buzzed again. Then again. On the 4th buzz, she grabbed it irritably. What? Is this Rachel Moore? A voice, mechanical and precise. A translator device, she realized. Someone speaking through alien tech. Who's asking? Please remain at your current location. Representatives of the Krell Imperial Embassy will arrive at your residence in approximately 8 minutes. Do not be alarmed. The line went dead. Rachel stared at her phone like it had just turned into a snake. The Krell Imperial Embassy? That made no sense. Unless those Vraxian kids had filed some kind of official complaint and now she was in actual legal trouble. Her stomach dropped. Could she go to jail for spraying someone with cleaning solution? Was that assault in the eyes of galactic law? She looked around her apartment. Dirty dishes in the sink, laundry piled on the chair, her xenobiology textbook still stacked in the corner because she'd never had the heart to throw them away. If officials were coming, she should probably make it look less like a disaster zone. She grabbed the laundry and stuffed it in the closet, then did a quick sweep of the obvious trash. Exactly 8 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. Not a normal knock. 3 precise taps, like someone was following a protocol. Rachel opened the door and forgot how to breathe. 2 Krell stood in her hallway, but these weren't regular Krell. They wore armor that looked like it cost more than her entire apartment building, polished to a mirror shine, with the Imperial seal glowing softly on their chests. Energy weapons hung at their sides. These weren't police. These were Imperial Guard. Rachel Moore? The taller one asked. Yeah, that's me. Look, if this is about what happened at the diner, I can explain. You are not in trouble, the guard said, and Rachel felt her knees go weak with relief. War Prince Theodore requests your immediate presence at the Imperial Embassy. Transportation has been arranged. Please come with us. War Prince who now? All will be explained. Time is of importance. Please. Rachel looked down at herself. Still in her diner uniform, stained with coffee and that cleaning solution, smelling like French fries and desperation. Can I at least change? That will not be necessary. The War Prince was most insistent on immediacy. This was insane. Completely insane. But 2 Imperial guards were standing in her hallway, and when the Krell Empire asked you to come with them, you didn't really say no. Rachel grabbed her jacket and phone and followed them down the stairs. A transport waited outside that made her beat-up Honda look like a relic from the Stone Age. Sleek, hovering 3 feet off the ground, completely silent. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing an interior that was more luxury hotel than vehicle. Soft lighting, seats that looked like they'd massage your back while serving you champagne. Rachel slid in, and the guards took positions on either side of her. The transport lifted smoothly and began gliding through the city streets. Through the tinted windows, she could see people stopping to stare. Vehicles like this didn't come to neighborhoods like hers. "Can someone please tell me what's going on?" Rachel asked. The guard on her left tilted his head slightly. "The elderly Krell you assisted this evening. You know who he was?" "Just an old guy being harassed by some punks." That old guy was War Prince Theodore, father of Emperor William and retired Supreme Commander of the entire Krell Imperial Fleet. He is also the Emperor's chief advisor on interspecies relations. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. "You're joking." The Krell do not joke about matters of Imperial security. But he was just sitting there alone, in a diner, in my neighborhood. Why would someone like that? The War Prince conducts what he calls observation walks once per month. He disguises himself, removes his official escorts, and moves through various sectors to observe how different species interact with the vulnerable and elderly. He has been doing this for 3 years. Rachel's mind was racing. That's incredibly dangerous. We tell him this constantly. He does not listen. He insists it is necessary to understand the true nature of species character. The second guard spoke for the first time. "In 3 years and 42 observation walks across 17 different worlds, you are the first being who has intervened on his behalf. The first to risk personal consequence to defend him." "That's impossible. Someone else must have." "No one," the first guard said firmly. "You are the first." The War Prince was most interested in understanding why. The transport banked smoothly, and through the window, Rachel could see they were approaching the embassy district. Buildings here were works of art, each one representing a different member species of the Galactic Council. The Krell Embassy rose above them all, a structure of crystalline spires that caught the city lights and refracted them into rainbows. They landed on a private platform halfway up the building. The doors opened, and Rachel was escorted through corridors that screamed wealth and power. Alien art on the walls, floors so polished she could see her reflection, the air itself seeming to hum with importance. Finally, they reached a set of double doors. The guards opened them and gestured for her to enter. Rachel stepped into a room that was somehow both massive and intimate. One wall was entirely glass, showing the new Seattle skyline. The furniture was built for Krell physiology but adapted with human-style chairs scattered throughout. And there, standing by the window, was the elderly Krell from the diner. Except now he was surrounded by medical staff checking his vitals, advisors whispering in his ear, and enough security to invade a small country. He turned when she entered, and those multifaceted eyes fixed on her. The room went quiet. Everyone was staring at Rachel in her stained waitress uniform, smelling like a deep fryer, completely out of place in this temple of galactic power. The War Prince dismissed everyone with a gesture. They left reluctantly, the medical staff packing up their equipment, the advisors shooting curious glances at Rachel. Within moments, it was just the two of them. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to a human-style chair. Rachel sat today. Her hands were shaking slightly, so she clasped them in her lap. The War Prince studied her for a long moment. Then he asked the simplest and most complicated question possible. "Why?" Rachel blinked. "Why what? Why did you intervene? You gained nothing. You risked your employment, your safety, potential legal consequences. You did not know who I was. I had no resources to offer you, no power to benefit you. You saw an elderly alien being harassed, and you acted. In 3 years of observation, through dozens of similar scenarios staged and unstaged, no one has done what you did. So I ask again. Why?" Rachel thought about it. Really thought about it. "I studied your people in college," she finally said. "Spent 4 years learning Krell history, culture, language. I read about the Unity Wars, about how the Krell fleet threw themselves between the smaller species and the Dominion invasion. How you took losses that should have broken you but kept fighting because you believed weaker species deserved protection." She pointed at his chest, at the faded metal. "That's a Star of Valor. I wrote a whole paper on those. Only 12 Krell in your entire history have ever earned one. You got that defending someone, protecting someone, standing up when it would have been easier to stand down. Tonight, you needed someone to do that for you. How could I not? The War Prince was silent for so long that Rachel worried she'd said something wrong. Then his carapace made that clicking sound. Laughter. Do you know what my son, the Emperor, says about humanity? He says your species is chaos wrapped in curiosity, brilliant and foolish in equal measure, impossible to predict. I think he is wrong. I think humanity is simply young enough to still believe in doing the right thing for its own sake. He moved closer, moving easier now that the medical staff had treated him. I would like to offer you a position, Rachel Moore. Personal cultural liaison to the War Prince of the Krell Empire. You would live here, at the embassy. Your role would be to advise me on human behavior, culture, and interspecies relations. The pay is substantial. The work is meaningful. And perhaps most importantly, you would finally get to use that xenobiology degree. Rachel's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. No words came out. You don't have to answer now, the War Prince said kindly. Though I hope you will consider it seriously. The galaxy needs more people willing to stand up for strangers. I would like to help you become one of the people who teaches others to do the same. Rachel found her voice. When would I start? The clicking laughter again. Is now too soon? Rachel's quarters in the embassy made her old apartment look like a cardboard box. She had a bedroom, a living area, a bathroom with a shower that had 17 different settings, and a window view that showed half of New Seattle sprawled out below. But the best part, the part that made her actually tear up a little, was the study. An entire room just for books and learning, with a desk made of some alien wood that seemed to glow faintly in the dark. The War Prince had given her access to the Imperial database her first night there. Rachel didn't sleep. She sat at that desk, scrolling through files that humans weren't supposed to see for another 50 years, learning things about the galaxy that made her college education look like kindergarten. And that's when she learned the truth. The Krell were dying. Not in a dramatic way, not from war or plague or anything that could be fought. They were just fading. Their birth rate had dropped by 70% in the last century. Experts predicted that in 3 generations, maybe 4, there wouldn't be enough Krell left to maintain their civilization. Their empire would crumble, their culture would become a museum exhibit, and the species that had once protected half the galaxy would be gone. Rachel read through medical reports, sociological studies, desperate attempts by Krell scientists to understand why their people had simply stopped having children. Some said it was environmental. Others blamed it on philosophy, that the Krell had become so focused on honor and duty that they'd forgotten how to live. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. The clock was ticking. She found the War Prince in his office the next morning. He was reviewing reports, his crystalline fingers moving across holographic displays with practiced ease. The observation walks, Rachel said without preamble. They're not just about understanding other species. You're looking for someone to carry on what the Krell used to be. Theodore looked up at her, and something like approval flickered in those multifaceted eyes. You read the population reports. All of them. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Few do. We keep it quiet to avoid appearing weak to potential enemies. He gestured for her to sit. But yes, you are correct. If Krell culture is to survive beyond our species, it must be adopted by others. Honor, protection of the weak, sacrifice for the greater good. These ideals kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart during the Unity Wars. If they die with us, I fear what will rise in their place. Humanity, Rachel said slowly. You're testing humanity to see if we can be that successor. Among others. But humanity shows the most promise. You are young, aggressive, curious, and despite your flaws, you possess remarkable empathy for species not your own. Tonight was the first time in 3 years I saw those qualities directed toward a Krell with nothing to offer in return. No political advantage. No economic benefit. Just conscience. Rachel felt the weight of that settle on her shoulders. No pressure or anything. Theodore's clicking laugh echoed through the office. Indeed. But you need not carry it alone. That is why you are here. To help me understand your species, so we can nurture the best of what you are. The next 3 weeks were a crash course in diplomatic protocol that made Rachel's brain hurt. She learned which species found eye contact aggressive and which found the lack of it insulting. She memorized the 17 different ways to greet a Krell depending on their military rank. She practiced moving through formal events without tripping over her own feet. The other cultural liaisons watched her with barely disguised contempt. There were 5 of them, 1 each from major species in the Galactic Council. They'd spent decades climbing diplomatic ladders, kissing the right hands and tentacles, earning their positions through careful political maneuvering. And here was Rachel, a human waitress who'd been on the job for 3 weeks, living in the same corridor they did, advising the war prince directly. A Centaurian named Vel approached her in the commissary one afternoon. Centaurians looked almost human except for the silver patterns that moved across their skin like living tattoos. "You know what they call you?" Vel said, not bothering to sit down. "The charity case. Theodore's pet project. Everyone knows you're just here because you got lucky one night." Rachel set down her fork carefully. "Maybe I did get lucky. But I'm still here, and I'm doing the work. If that bothers you, that sounds like a you problem." Vel's skin patterns flashed red. "Anger. You have no idea what you're doing. This isn't serving coffee. One wrong word at a diplomatic function could start a war." "Then I guess I better not say the wrong word." The real test came 2 weeks later. A formal state dinner, celebrating some treaty or another. Rachel wore a formal gown that the embassy staff had picked out for her, and she felt like a kid playing dress-up. The dining hall was enormous, filled with delegates from 40 different species, all of them important, all of them knowing exactly where they fit in the galactic hierarchy. Rachel knew where she fit too. At the absolute bottom. She was seated near the war prince, which was an honor, but also meant everyone could see her. Every mistake would be public. She focused on her breathing and tried to remember which fork was for what. The Vraxian ambassador arrived late, making an entrance. Ambassador Keth was older, covered in ritual scars that proclaimed his status as a warrior. He strode through the hall like he owned it, and maybe in a way he did. The Vraxian Empire was the second most powerful in the galaxy, and everyone knew it. He spotted Theodore and made his way over, his massive frame casting shadows across the table. "War Prince," he said, his voice booming. "I heard about your latest adventure. Playing dress-up in human slums. How quaint." The conversations around them died. Everyone was listening now. Is that what the mighty Krell have become? Street theater for the entertainment of lesser species. Theodore remained calm, but Rachel felt her blood pressure rising. She knew she should stay quiet. This wasn't her fight. She was just the waitress who got lucky, remember? But something in the ambassador's tone, the casual cruelty of it, the way he was trying to humiliate Theodore in front of everyone, reminded her of those teenage punks in the diner. Different species, same attitude. Power-mocking vulnerability. Rachel stood up. The chair scraping across the floor was loud in the sudden silence. "Ambassador Keth," she said in High Vraxian. Not the street dialect. The formal tongue used in courts and ceremonies, the one she'd learned from obscure academic texts. "With respect, you misunderstand the situation entirely." Ketha's eyes widened slightly. A human speaking High Vraxian was rare. Speaking it well was nearly impossible. Rachel continued, her pronunciation careful. "There is an old Vraxian proverb from the Third Dynasty. Tak vel morith shon, vel shon keth morith. The strong do not prove their strength by crushing the weak. They prove it by protecting them. Or have the Vraxian forgotten the wisdom of their ancestors?" You could have heard a pin drop. Rachel had just quoted a proverb that was over 2,000 years old, from a period of Vraxian history that most Vraxians themselves didn't study. And she'd done it in front of the entire diplomatic corps. Keth stared at her. His skin was shifting colors, running through several shades before settling on deep purple. Respect, Rachel remembered. That was the color for respect. "How does a human know the teachings of the Third Dynasty?" he asked, switching to High Vraxian himself. "I studied xenolinguistics at university," Rachel said, switching back to common for the benefit of everyone else listening. "Wrote my thesis on how language shapes interspecies moral frameworks. The Third Dynasty fascinates me because your people went from conquest-focused to protection-focused, and that shift is reflected in how your language evolved. The same word for power started also meaning responsibility." Keth was silent for a long moment. Then he did something Rachel didn't expect. He laughed. A genuine, booming laugh that filled the hall. A human who knows our history better than most Vraxian. Incredible. He looked at Theodore. "I came here to mock you, War Prince. Instead, I find myself impressed. If this is the quality of advisor you surround yourself with, perhaps your observation walks are wiser than I credited." He turned back to Rachel. "You are wasted as a cultural liaison, young human. Someone with your knowledge should be teaching, not translating." Rachel felt her face flush. "Thank you, Ambassador." As Keth moved away, the hall erupted in conversation. Rachel sat down, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. She just had a confrontation with one of the most powerful diplomats in the galaxy, and somehow, she'd survived. Across the table, Theodore's carapace was clicking softly. That laugh again. His eyes met hers, and she saw something there that looked like pride. Later that night, as Rachel was getting ready for bed, there was a knock at her door. Theodore stood there, looking thoughtful. "The ambassador was right," he said simply. "You should be teaching." "I barely know what I'm doing here," Rachel protested. "Precisely. You have knowledge and passion but lack the cynicism that comes with decades in diplomacy. You still believe in ideals. That is worth more than experience." He paused. "My son, the Emperor, arrives next week. I think it is time you met him. We have something important to discuss." Rachel's stomach flipped. The Emperor? Of the entire Krell Empire? Sure. No big deal. As Theodore walked away, Rachel realized her life had shifted again. She thought the embassy was her destination. She was starting to suspect it was just another step on a much longer journey. The Emperor arrived on a Tuesday morning, and the entire embassy lost its mind. Rachel had never seen the staff this frantic. Every surface was polished until it gleamed. Security protocols were tripled. The head of protocol walked around with a tablet, checking and rechecking every tiny detail, muttering to himself in Krell. Rachel stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her formal attire for the 10th time. She'd been briefed on proper etiquette when meeting the Emperor. Don't speak unless spoken to. Keep eye contact brief but not too brief. Stand at attention but not rigid. Bow at exactly 30 degrees. Her head was swimming with rules. There was a knock at her door. Theodore stood there, looking amused at her obvious panic. "Stop fidgeting," he said. "You look fine. And William is not as intimidating as people make him out to be." "He's the emperor of one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy," Rachel said. "That's pretty much the definition of intimidating. He is also my son, who once got his head stuck in a railing as a child and cried until I freed him." Perspective, Rachel. Despite her nerves, Rachel smiled. It was easy to forget that even emperors were people once. Emperor William arrived in a transport that made the one Rachel had ridden in look like a toy. The landing platform was lined with guards, advisors, and every important person in the embassy. Rachel stood near the back, trying to be invisible. The Emperor stepped out, and Rachel's first thought was that he looked younger than she'd expected. His carapace was bright, almost glowing with health, marked with the deep blue patterns that indicated royal lineage. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to doubt your place in the universe. Theodore greeted him formally, and they went through some kind of traditional exchange in Krell that Rachel couldn't quite follow. Then William's eyes swept across the assembled crowd and landed directly on her. "You must be Rachel Moore," he said in perfect English. Every head turned to stare at her. Rachel felt her throat go dry. "Yes, Your Majesty. My father has told me about you. We will speak later." It wasn't a request. The next few hours were a blur of formal meetings that Rachel wasn't invited to. She tried to work in her study, but her hands were shaking too much to focus. What did the Emperor want to talk to her about? Had she messed up somehow? Was she about to be politely escorted out of the embassy? Late in the afternoon, she was summoned to Theodore's private office. She walked there on legs that felt like jelly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Theodore and William were both there, standing by the window that overlooked the city. They turned when she entered, and Theodore gestured for her to sit. "Rachel," Theodore began, "my son and I have been working on something for several years now. Something that will require people like you to succeed." William took over, his voice calm and measured. "Are you familiar with the Unity Wars, Rachel?" "Of course. The Dominion tried to conquer the outer systems about 80 years ago. The Krell led the coalition that stopped them. Cost millions of lives." "It cost more than that," William said. "It nearly destroyed galactic civilization. And do you know why the war started?" Rachel thought back to her history classes. The Dominion believed smaller species were inferior and didn't deserve autonomy. Close, but not quite complete. The war started because there was no shared framework for interspecies ethics. No common understanding of rights, dignity, and protection. Every species had their own moral code, and when those codes conflicted, violence was the result. William moved closer, and Rachel could see the intensity in his eyes. "After the war, we tried to establish that framework through treaties and agreements. But laws only work when people believe in them. When they understand why they matter." Theodore stepped in. We have spent the last 3 years searching for something. Not laws or treaties, but people. People who act from conscience rather than obligation. People who protect the vulnerable not because it benefits them, but because it is right. My father's observation walks, William continued, were designed to find individuals who embody the ethics we desperately need to teach. In 3 years, across 17 worlds, through dozens of scenarios, you are the only one who passed the test. Rachel's mind was reeling. I don't understand. What are you asking me to do? William and Theodore exchanged a glance. Then William said, we are building an academy. The first interspecies ethics academy. A place where diplomats, peacekeepers, and cultural liaisons from every species in the Galactic Council will come to learn not just about other cultures, but about the fundamental principles that should guide all of us. How to recognize injustice. How to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. How to build a galaxy where what happened to my father in that diner becomes unthinkable. Rachel felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. That's incredible. But why are you telling me this? Because we want you to help build it, Theodore said simply. Design the human curriculum. Eventually, teach it. Help us create something that will outlast the Krell Empire itself. I'm not qualified for that. I served coffee 3 weeks ago. I don't have credentials or experience or... You have something more valuable, William interrupted. You have conviction. You studied xenobiology because you loved it, not because it would make you rich. You stood up to those teenagers knowing it would cost you your job. You defended my father not because you knew who he was, but because you saw someone who needed defending. He sat down across from her, and suddenly he didn't look like an emperor. He looked like someone who was tired and worried and desperate for help. The galaxy is becoming crueler, Rachel. My father has witnessed it firsthand. Abuse of the vulnerable is rising across all species. The compassion and honor that prevented another war is eroding. This academy might be our last chance to teach the next generation before we lose our way completely. Rachel's head was spinning. Where would this academy even be? Here, Theodore said. New Seattle. On Earth. Earth? Why not the Krell homeworld or some neutral station? Because humanity represents the future we are trying to build, William explained. Your species is young, still figuring out your place in the galaxy. You make mistakes, yes, but you also show remarkable capacity for growth and empathy. Earth will be a symbol that this academy is not about Krell values or Vraxian values or any single species. It is about universal values. And we need humans at the center of it to make that vision real. Rachel sat there, trying to process everything. A month ago, she was wiping down tables and worrying about rent. Now the Emperor of the Krell Empire was asking her to help build an institution that could shape the future of galactic civilization. I need to ask for something, Rachel said finally. If I do this, if I help build this academy, I want scholarships. Lots of them. 4 humans from working-class backgrounds. People like me who have the passion and the knowledge but not the money or connections. If we're going to teach universal values, we can't only teach the privileged. William didn't even hesitate. Done. That is exactly the kind of thinking we need. There is one more thing you should know, Theodore said, his tone grave. The teenagers who harassed me were not an anomaly. We have observed similar behavior across dozens of worlds. Young people from powerful species targeting the weak and vulnerable. It is becoming normalized. Expected, even. If we do not intervene now, if we do not teach a better way, another war is inevitable. And next time, we may not survive it. The weight of that statement hung in the air. Rachel thought about those Vraxian teenagers in the diner, laughing while an old warrior sat there trembling. She thought about all the people who had looked away. She thought about Mr. Peterson, who fired her for doing the right thing. When do we start? She asked. Theodore's carapace clicked with laughter. The preliminary plans are already drawn up. Construction begins in 2 months. We will need you full-time for curriculum development starting immediately. William stood, offering his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Rachel shook it, feeling the strange cool smoothness of his crystalline fingers. You are making history, Rachel Moore, the Emperor said. I hope you are ready. As she left the office, Rachel realized she was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. She'd spent 3 years feeling like her education was worthless, like she'd made wrong choices and wasted her potential. Turned out, she'd been preparing for this her entire life. She just hadn't known it yet. The next morning, Rachel found a message on her tablet. The official announcement would be made in 1 week. The Interspecies Ethics Academy. Coming to Earth. And she was going to be one of the people who built it from the ground up. She stood at her window, looking out at New Seattle, imagining what this place would look like in a year. In 10 years. In 100 years, when the academy had trained thousands of students, when those students had gone out and changed their worlds. Maybe the Krell were fading. But what they stood for didn't have to fade with them. Rachel smiled and got to work. 6 months felt like 6 years. Rachel had barely slept, barely ate anything that wasn't grabbed between meetings, and had consumed enough coffee to probably violate several health regulations. But it was done. The Interspecies Ethics Academy stood in what used to be an abandoned industrial district in New Seattle, transformed into something that looked like it had been beamed down from the future. The architecture was incredible, a blend of Krell crystalline design and human practicality. Spires that caught the sunlight and scattered it into rainbows, but also classrooms with proper desks and whiteboards. Gardens filled with plants from 17 different worlds, but also a cafeteria that served decent pizza. It was beautiful and functional, which pretty much summed up everything Rachel had tried to accomplish over the past 6 months. The curriculum had been the hardest part. How do you teach ethics to species that evolved on different worlds, with different survival pressures, different social structures? Rachel had worked with educators from across the galaxy, arguing, compromising, rewriting the same lesson plans dozens of times. There were nights she'd wanted to quit, to tell Theodore and William that she wasn't the right person for this. But then she'd walk through the construction site and see it taking shape. She'd read applications from students who wanted to attend, young beings from every corner of the galaxy who wanted to learn how to make things better. And she'd remember why she was doing this. Now it was opening day. Rachel stood backstage at the main auditorium, wearing formal academic robes that someone had designed specifically for her. They blended human and Krell traditions, which meant she looked either incredibly distinguished or like she was wearing a very expensive bathrobe. She was too nervous to tell which. "You are pacing," Theodore said. He'd taken the position of Chancellor, which Rachel thought was perfect. He'd been teaching people through his observation walks for years. Now he just got to do it officially. "I have to give a speech in front of billions of people," Rachel said, her hands shaking slightly. "Literally billions. This is being broadcast across 70 star systems." "So speak to one person," Theodore said calmly. "Find someone in the audience and speak to them. Pretend everyone else is not there." "That's terrible advice. I'll know they're there." Theodore's clicking laugh echoed in the small space. "Then speak as you did in the diner. With courage and honesty. That is all anyone can ask." The auditorium was packed. Rachel peeked through the curtain and immediately regretted it. The front rows were filled with diplomats, politicians, and leaders from dozens of species. She recognized the Vraxian ambassador, Keth, sitting near the front. Behind them were journalists, their recording equipment pointed at the stage like weapons. And filling the rest of the massive space were the students. 372 of them, the first class of the academy, representing 37 different species. They looked so young. And hopeful. And terrified in that way students always looked on the first day of something new. William gave the opening remarks, his voice carrying the weight of his position but also genuine warmth. He talked about the Unity Wars, about the cost of those conflicts, about the dream of building something better. He talked about his father's observation walks and the search for conscience in action. Then it was Rachel's turn. Her legs felt like they might give out as she walked to the podium. The lights were blinding, and she couldn't see past the first few rows. Maybe that was a blessing. She gripped the edges of the podium and took a breath. Then she abandoned her prepared speech entirely. 6 months ago, Rachel began, I was a waitress at a diner in New Seattle. I had a degree in xenobiology that I never got to use, an apartment I could barely afford, and a boss who didn't care about anything except keeping customers happy and avoiding complaints. She could see confusion rippling through the audience. This wasn't the formal, dignified speech they'd been expecting. One night, an elderly Krell came into the diner. 4 teenage Vraxian were giving him a hard time. Harassing him. Making fun of him. Throwing food at him. And everyone in that diner, including my boss, looked away. They pretended not to see it. Because getting involved meant risk. It meant potential conflict. It meant making things uncomfortable. Rachel's voice grew stronger. I lost my job that night. I sprayed one of those teenagers in the face with cleaning solution and helped the elderly Krell escape out the back door. My boss fired me on the spot. I walked home in the rain, unemployed, thinking I'd just made the stupidest decision of my life. She paused, letting that sink in. Turns out that elderly Krell was War Prince Theodore, father of the Emperor. Turns out that moment changed my entire life. But here's the thing. I didn't know who he was when I helped him. I just saw someone who needed help and everyone else refusing to give it. And I couldn't live with that. Rachel looked out at the students, and suddenly they didn't look so scary. They just looked like people trying to figure out how to be good in a complicated universe. You're here because you want to learn about interspecies relations, about diplomacy, about ethics and cultural understanding. That's great. We're going to teach you all of that. But the most important lesson is this: there will be moments in your life when doing the right thing costs you something. When standing up means standing alone. When protecting someone means risking yourself. Those moments define who you are more than any degree or title or achievement. Her eyes found Mr. Peterson in the back. He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. This academy exists because we believe character matters more than credentials. Because we believe the galaxy desperately needs people who act from conscience, not calculation. Because if we don't teach the next generation to protect the vulnerable and stand against cruelty, we're going to tear ourselves apart in another war that none of us will survive. Rachel's voice dropped, became more intimate. I was terrified that night at the diner. My hands were shaking. I knew I'd probably lose my job. But I also knew that if I looked away, if I let fear stop me from acting, I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror. And that cost was too high. She straightened up, looking across the entire auditorium now. So that's my challenge to you. Not to be fearless, because fear is natural and sometimes smart. But to act anyway. To let your conscience be louder than your fear. To build the kind of galaxy where what happened to War Prince Theodore becomes unthinkable. The applause started slowly, then built into something like thunder. Rachel stepped back from the podium, her legs shaking, and Theodore met her with what she'd learned to recognize as a proud expression. The ceremony continued with more speeches, an official ribbon cutting, and a tour of the facilities for the media. But Rachel kept thinking about what came next. The actual teaching. The hard work of turning ideals into action. As the crowds dispersed, Rachel noticed movement near the back entrance. Mr. Peterson and the 4 Vraxian teenagers stood there awkwardly, clearly not sure if they should approach. Rachel excused herself and walked over. Up close, Peterson looked older than she remembered, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I was wrong to fire you. Wrong to look away. I've been doing that my whole life, taking the easy path, and I'm ashamed of it. Then do better, Rachel said simply. It's not too late. The Vraxian teenagers were different from that night. Subdued. Their leader, the tall one she'd sprayed, stepped forward. Our families were ashamed when they found out what we did. The court sentenced us to complete the ethics program here. Full enrollment, all 4 years. Rachel had known about this. She'd actually advocated for it instead of prison time. Welcome to the academy. I hope you learned something. We already have, he said. We learned that a human half our size has more courage than all of us combined. We learned that we were acting like the bullies and cowards our ancestors would have been disgusted by. We learned that strength without honor is just cruelty. His friends nodded, looking equally uncomfortable and sincere. Good, Rachel said. Hold on to that feeling. Use it. Become better than you were. As they walked away to join the other students, Theodore appeared at Rachel's side. You gave them a second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance. Isn't that part of what we're teaching? Indeed. Theodore watched the sun setting over New Seattle, painting the academy spires in gold and crimson. My son tells me enrollment applications for next year have already exceeded 10,000. Students from species we did not even expect to participate. That's incredible. It is terrifying, Theodore corrected. The responsibility of it. But also hopeful. He turned to her. Thank you, Rachel Moore. For being the first. For believing this was possible. Rachel thought about her tiny apartment, her waitressing uniform, her unused degree. She thought about the path that had led her here, all the moments that had felt like failures but turned out to be preparation. I was surviving before, she said. Working a job I didn't care about, living a life that didn't matter. Now I'm building something that might outlast all of us. There's a difference. Yes, Theodore agreed. There is. They stood there together as night fell, watching students from across the galaxy walking through gardens lit by bioluminescent plants, speaking languages Rachel was still learning, forming friendships that would have been impossible a generation ago. The academy was real. The dream was taking shape. And Rachel Moore, former waitress with a useless degree and an overdeveloped sense of right and wrong, was exactly where she belonged. Teaching the next generation that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. That one person standing up could change everything. That the galaxy was full of people waiting for someone to show them it was okay to be good. She'd been that someone once, in a diner on a rainy Tuesday. Now she'd helped train thousands more. The future suddenly looked a lot brighter.